everybody, it's David. We're back for a little bit more ladder play with the Dark Clockroaches deck that we talked about a while ago. We are looking at a list with no changes, but I did want to talk a little bit about some other options that other players have played in the list, just to sort of explain why we're running the list as we're running it before, or as we're running it the way that it is. I have seen some lists that don't run Initiative the Sands and instead choose to include more removal in the form of Annihilate, killing a unit with a single faction, or in Suffocate, killing a unit with 3 attack or less. These can also be included over Static Bolt. The reason that I have chosen not to run either of those cards, despite them being very strong removal, is that I have chosen to keep my deck mostly Time Primal, and keep the Shadow relatively light and more desirable later in the game than earlier in the game. Whereas if I were to play Suffocate or Annihilate, I would want that Shadow influence available much earlier in the game so that I would be able to remove my opponent's units. But Static Bolt does just fine for those early units, and I'm very focused on getting Primal influence early in the game instead of Shadow influence. You can also run cards like Dark Wisp, which just improves card flow. Basically, the other option for this deck is to make it a Time Shadow deck, splashing a little bit of Primal for Twinning Ritual and Crown of Possibilities. Many of those lists will cut down on Nesting Avisaurs. They won't run Static Bolt, and they don't plan on playing Second Sight until much later in the game. But I just find that I want to get the whole engine online as quickly as possible, and so I want to be able to cast my Second Sights early. I can use Static Bolts as my removal. I'll be able to play Twinning Rituals quickly. And prioritizing Primal Influence also enables the turn 2 Crown of Possibilities, which I talked about in our first video as being one of the most powerful plays available to the deck. And that also requires that I play 4 Initiative the Sands, because it's the only card in Eternal that allows for a turn 2 Crown of Possibilities. So that's why I'm making those choices instead of any of the other possible choices. I want to play Initiative the Sands because I want to be able to play Crown of Possibilities on turn 2 as often as possible. And I'm playing not so much Shadow, not so many Shadow cards, because I want to enable Second Sights and Static Bolts and also Crown of Possibilities as early as I possibly can. That said, let's get into it. See who we are up against first. Feeling pretty good today. Played a little bit of Forge earlier. So we're in an eternal mindset. We're ready to play. Okay, we're playing against Kegaden. We're looking at our hand here, and we've got all of our influence requirements. We'll have a turn 2 Piercing Grief. We have Find the Way to find us some additional power drops for when we want to hit this Ancient of Lore. Looks good to me. We also have Clockroach. Clockroach notwithstanding. Clockroach is great. We're just going to start on Seat of Wisdom. We don't have any interest in hiding what our deck is to our opponent. We just want to get in there. Our opponent appears to be on a deck that includes Strangers. I don't know if they will have a fully Strangers themed deck, but that's probably what they're on. We're just going to get in with the Piercing Grief. We're fine trading early. We're fine just hitting for 3 and letting it die, letting Revenge trigger. So the game plan here is kind of to set up our influence with Find the Ways, And then eventually we'll play Ancient of Lore to sort of draw into the rest of our deck. Okay, so our opponent is playing a full-on Strangers deck. Strangers are a group of cards in Eternal that all improve each other in some way. They can give stat boosts, or they can give abilities, and many of the Strangers are just 2-mana 2/2s that gain you 2 types of influence, which lets you play 5 factions of Strangers, or lets you play Strangers with heavy influence requirements, or spells with heavy influence requirements in your Strangers deck. As you can see, our opponent is getting off to a very fast start here, and so I'll need to start affecting the board very quickly. Which I think means we need to start getting Clockroaches into play. I'm just going to play Seat of Cunning and a Clockroach. And then next turn I can go ahead and play Find the Way and Temple Scribe and just do some blocking, get a tapped land into play. We're not actually going to block this turn because we want to be able to double block next turn if our opponent gives us the opportunity. We might well lose here. Our draw was a little bit slow, and our opponent's draw was very fast with multiple 1-drops. So we could be losing in relatively short order here. One thing that is saving us is that our opponent is a little bit short on power sources. They are playing Reunite, which draws any stranger they want. This could be problematic. There are a couple of relatively cheap strangers. They might honestly just be finding another Ruthless Stranger to give their strangers additional power buffs and get us dead even faster. But hopefully they will not be able to stem the tide of the Clockroaches. Clockroaches are just really, really good. I'm going to play Temple Scribe here. I want to be able to set up some double blocks. Oh, we drew a Dark Return. That's really nice. Give us some more Clockroaches. Looks like they probably did get a Ruthless Stranger with their Reunite. We're going to prioritize killing the strangers that give abilities rather than just killing this largest stranger that has the biggest base stats, because we really need to make sure that we are not dying. So we're going to try to make the strangers a little easier to kill and make the strangers kill us a little less quickly. Okay, Seat of Wisdom. Let's see, do we have time to play this Find the Way? We are going to Dark Return a Clockroach. So if we play Find the Way, we can play our Seat of Wisdom undepleted. We'll have 4 total power available to us, which will let us play a Clockroach. And we kind of just have to hope that our opponent doesn't have anything that boosts the stranger's power. Because if they do, then we're just going to be dead. But for the time being, we'll just play our Clockroach and hope that that's good enough. We're really looking to find that Piercing Grief that we played on turn 2, because if we do that, then we can get a little bit more life, so we're not dying quite as quickly. Okay, so here our opponent did have another Ruthless Stranger, which means that we are not quite dead. Oh, our opponent isn't actually attacking with all of the strangers. They probably have a Torch, and I think it might be worth playing around that. We'll just go ahead and block this guy here, because if we let 4 damage through, we'd be at 3 and dead to Torch. So we'll do this one. We'll play our Influence, and we don't really have a whole lot of recourse beyond just playing 2 Clockroaches. So we'll do that. And at this point we have to just hope our opponent doesn't have Torch this turn. Which is unfortunate. We played around it last turn, but we couldn't play around it this turn, so kind of dead. Our opponent did not appear to have Torch. We're going to play Ancient Lore because we're pretty deep in our deck. If you'll remember, we played that Piercing Grief on turn 2. It's now turn 7, so we've drawn 5 cards since then. And when it revenges, it gets shuffled into our deck with Destiny in the top 10 cards. So if we play Ancient Lore, there's a good chance we're going to be able to find that Piercing Grief. And I think that's worth doing because we really want to be able to gain some life. We didn't find the Piercing Grief, but we can just play Ancient Lore, another Ancient Lore, and hopefully find it there. Okay, there we go. We found it. Found our Piercing Grief. It's got Destiny. It gets +1/+1 off of the Ancient Lore, which is kind of nice. It's got Destiny, like I said, so it draws us an additional card. We can go ahead and attack with it, gain some life. Unfortunately, we will still be dead to Torch if our opponent ever draws it, but there's a chance we could win this game. We have a couple Clockroaches back to block, so they can only get in for 6. They don't have lethal. Oh, their Strangers have flying. We're dead. So this is the reason that Piercing Grief was so important for the deck, is that the engine can take a while to get online. And so, I forgot to mention, we're Bronze 2 in the Ranked League. This is the second lowest possible rank, but the reason that happened is that it's now August. I recorded the previous video on July 31st. I recorded this video on August 1st. So we had a rollover of the ranked ladder, and I lost a little bit of my rank as a result. But we should still be able to climb pretty quickly with this Clockroaches deck. It's very good, but back to what I was saying before is that Piercing Grief was really important for the deck, because it can take a while to get the engine online, and we really needed to be able to gain some life early and gain some life late, so that we didn't die quite as quickly to the aggro decks, and then we were able to get out of Torch range. And just there, you saw how that was a problem. But in any case, we're looking at this hand here, and we have a turn 3 Crown of Possibilities. Like I said, I'm not positive that this alone is enough reason to keep a hand, because we don't have a whole lot of other action. But I don't have a good reason to believe that it's not good enough to play Crown of Possibilities on turn 3. We should be able to find a unit at some point that does something, and we do have things to do in the meantime. We can just play these Find the Ways, develop our power, develop our influence sources. So I'm not super worried about it. We'll be able to play the Crown of Possibilities, and then eventually we'll draw a unit, and we'll get our engine going. We're playing against a different player but also on Strangers, which is a little unusual. The Strangers deck hasn't been viable as of yet, but maybe with Omens of the past. I haven't really explored the Strangers deck with Omens of the past. I haven't seen a lot of people playing it up until today, but you know, maybe some of the cards in Omens make the deck much better than I think. I wanted to spend 4 power here because we have so many 2s in our hand, which is why I did not play the Shadow Sigil and the Piercing Grief, because the Shadow Sigil is depleted. We found it off of a Find the Way. But like I said, I wanted to spend 4, and we can spend 4 and play a depleted Sigil next turn, so that's all fine. I'm going to save this Static Bolt for a Stranger that does something. Oh, our opponent might not be on Strangers. They might just be playing this Hero Stranger to help fix their influence. Things like Torgov. So, Torgov lets them loot when they hit me, which can be really powerful. It can be very strong. Because it will let them sort of find power early and non-power cards later. So I'm going to go ahead and run this Piercing Grief in, and because he blocked, I'm able to Static Bolt it, which is really nice. And yeah, it kind of just gets that problem out of the way for the time being. It also gets our Piercing Grief going. We have our Crown of Possibilities, so I want to get Piercing Griefs and other cards of Destiny into my deck. I think I want to just Twinning Ritual this Piercing Grief. Usually you want to use Twinning Ritual on Clockroaches, but just because I don't have a whole lot else to do, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have other things to be doing in the meantime. Just getting these Piercing Griefs online. And I think again we're gonna do this thing where we just don't play the depleted Sigil and we just spend 4 power this turn. We can play a depleted Sigil and potentially spend as much as 6 power next turn. I won't be too beat up if we can't spend 6 power next turn. But we're basically just looking to develop these Piercing Griefs in the time being. So we'll spend 5 power this turn. We'll find a depleted sigil. We'll play a depleted sigil, and we'll play our 2 cards. We're just going to keep attacking. Hopefully these Piercing Griefs will start showing up off the top of our deck soon, because they do have Destiny. This one has Aegis and Overwhelm, so it's pretty difficult for our opponent to interact with it as it's attacking them, which is really nice. I'm not really worried about this 2-mana 2/2 hitting us, because we've had all these Piercing Griefs that are just sort of getting online. I don't really want to play this Tock Tick right now, because I want it to get buffed by Clockroaches later, and I might be able to block with it at some point, but in the meantime I can just block with Temple Scribe. I don't need to block with Tock Tick. And the charge isn't really doing anything for me because he had a 4/5 available block. So it looks like our opponent is probably playing some sort of Huru or Primal Justice, probably Spells deck. It's probably a deck playing Channel the Tempest, which is an expensive spell. I don't remember if it's 6 or 8 mana, but it's an expensive spell that draws you 3 cards and deals damage to your opponent equal to the number of cards in your hand, which requires 3 Primal Influence and can kill you dead from a pretty high life total, kind of out of nowhere. I want to make use of Ambush here to just kill my opponent's 2/2. This lets their 4/5 hit me and lets them draw a card and discard a card, colloquially called looting, which turned out to be a really bad decision. They got to the Privilege of Rank, which is really powerful. If you can discard it, you just get to not spend 3 mana, and you get to go find 2 Justice Sigils, hit power late into the game, and just do all sorts of crazy things. Champion of Order is going to absolutely destroy us. We probably don't have any way to win, which is really unfortunate. I'm going to keep this Initiative's Hands back to block Torgov so that they don't get to loot again. But unfortunately, our opponent now has their Champions of Order doubling their power and also making copies of themselves every turn. So we're going to die in 2 turns. That's the basic gist of that. We're just going to be dead in 2 turns. We found a Clockroach, but it's probably just not enough. We need to draw multiple Piercing Griefs next turn, most likely, in order to have any sort of real chance at winning this game. This is really bad for us. Our opponent had multiple legendaries that were very good against us. I think we're just going to block the 4/5 so that they don't get to loot again. Our life total is less important than making sure that we can maybe do something. Okay, we drew a Crown of Possibilities, so we are dead. This is a problem that I talked about earlier in the last video as well. We won 3 games in the introduction video, and we're losing a lot of games here. And you're kind of seeing how the deck loses. It can get rushed down if you don't get your engine online fast enough, and it can also lose to just mid-range threats if you don't draw your cards in the right order. If you sort of draw too many power sources at the wrong time, or if you just cannot find a Clockroach to do anything with. Okay, so we'll move on to the next game. We have a Static Bolt to interact early, we have a Second Sight, but we don't have a Crown of Possibilities, we don't have an Initiative's Hands, and we don't have a Clockroach. And so I'm not super fond of this hand. I think we're going to redraw it. I might be punished, we'll see. I ended up with a Clockroach and a Twinning Ritual and a Nesting Avisaur, which is about as good as I could hope for. Unfortunately, we don't have any primal sources, but Seek Power or Find the Way will find us those, and we also just have 10, 14 power sources, just power cards that produce Primal, so I'm not super worried about being able to find a Primal source in time. Luckily, Primal Sigil. We're just going to play Temple Scribe, get our draw on, try to find some more cards. Our opponent is on some flavor of Elysian. Could be a mirror match even. Could be on the Clockroach's deck. Could be on Shimmer Pack. Could be on a champion of Order, I think. The Elysian champion. Could be trying to enable that guy. We're just gonna play Clockroach and get some attacks on. We're basically looking to develop Nesting Avisaur into Twinning Ritual. We might play an Ancient of Lore first and see if we can't find a Crown of Possibilities. Our opponent hasn't played anything but a Seek Power in 3 turns, which is pretty unusual for most Elysian decks. Most of them will have Temple Scribe or Sandstorm Titan or something to play in the first few turns. Initiative of the Sands. If our opponent doesn't have a 4-drop, I'm very confused. I don't know what they're on. There are virtually no decks that would keep a hand with no plays in the first 4 turns, and our opponent did not redraw. So I don't really know what's going on there. But because they haven't committed anything to the board, I'm just going to play an Ancient Lore and see if I can draw cards. They didn't even negate my spell. Oh, I misclicked. Forgot to. Didn't attack this Temple Scribe. Probably not going to matter, but still incorrect. Still a misplay. We did find a Crown of Possibilities, which is really nice. It means that next turn we can play Time Sigil, Crown of Possibilities, and maybe Static Bolt something, or Second Sight, and put a Clockroach on top. I kind of want to play Crown of Possibilities and then Nesting Avisaur. I don't know if the power curve will work out that way for me. It's probably a little greedy to fail to spend that much power. But it would be the most efficient use of our cards. It would get us the most card economy. So that would be nice if we could do that. I'll just attack and see if my opponent does anything. Our opponent has a Storm Lynx, which will let them kill my Clockroach, which is kind of great. That's almost what I was hoping would happen, which sounds maybe a little weird, but the reason that I was hoping that would happen is that it lets me play Crown of Possibilities and Dark Return this turn. I can Dark Return this Clockroach, give a +1/+1, give it an ability. Ambush. Ambush is a nice ability. It lets us ambush their Storm Lynx at some point in the future. And I wanted to get a Clockroach with an ability that I could put on top of the Nesting Avisaur, because that will just get us the best possible economy out of our cards. And so that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be great. Okay, so our opponent is on something with Nesting Avisaur. They're drawing Static Bolts, or I don't think they're drawing Echo cards. I haven't seen them Echo anything yet. So I'm not certain what they just Nesting Avisaur. They might just be playing a big guy. That could certainly be the case. I am just going to play Nesting Avisaur and put our Clockroach with Ambush on top of our deck and pass the turn. I don't mind trading Nesting Avisaurs here. Okay, so our opponent did have an Echo card that I missed probably from very early in the game, probably from their opening hand, that they were able to put on top with Nesting Avisaur and re-Echo, which is probably pretty good for them. Generally, echoing Nesting Avisaurs is... Echo cards at Nesting Avisaur work pretty well. There's a Teriak Hatchling, which does have flying, which is mildly obnoxious, but it's not super concerning, in all honesty. Clockroaches are just going to be better in the end than the Teriak Hatchlings, and we have Crown of Possibilities going for us, which might even give our Clockroaches flying. Could also give them Killer and make it not an issue. But look, it gave our Clockroaches flying, which is really nice. So this turn, I'm just going to play... I'm going to play Find the Way, and I'm going to play a Clockroach with Flying and Ambush to eat one of their hatchlings, and I'm going to play Second Sight at the end of their turn to put this Clockroach back on top of my deck. That spends all 5 of my power, and also lets me develop my power further so that I can take additional actions in the future. But what this means is that I get to keep up 3 power so that my opponent's a little wary of what I'm doing, which is kind of nice. Makes them a little bit suspicious about what's going on. You know, I echoed a card multiple times, and I haven't played it yet, so they got to be wondering what I'm doing. They probably know it's Clockroach, because they saw a Clockroach out of me. They have a Psionic Savant. This card can be pretty strong. You can draw several cards over time. Okay, we're being attacked, as expected. We're going to ambush in our Clockroach. We're going to block. All this is just going according to plan, because our opponent spent all of their power before moving in combat. This is often not the best idea. If you can spend power after combat, it's usually a good idea to do so. Okay, so we have Flying, Overwhelm, and Ambush. We found an additional Crown of Possibilities, which is kind of nice for us. I'm going to play Crown of Possibilities, and I'm going to play Find the Way, and I'm going to play another Clockroach with Ambush this turn. Our opponent now knows that the Clockroaches have Flying and Ambush, so they probably won't attack into them. But there's just no good reason for me to play it right now, when I could play it during their turn. I'm also not going to attack with our Clockroach that we already have in play, because I want to be able to block this Psionic Savant if they have the ability to draw 6 cards or something with like multiple Second Sights. So that's why I'm holding this back. I think we have inevitability in the late game. I think our cards are just going to be better over time because we have multiple Crown of Possibilities and we have our Clockroaches. With a cost reduction, we have everything basically set up. So we're basically just marching onward towards an inevitable win, which is great. Okay, now we're going to just kill a Psionic Savant dead. We have this Static Bolt sitting in our hand, so we can just get that out of here before it becomes a real problem. And we can go ahead and Twinning Ritual our cheap Clockroach and play an expensive Clockroach. Which I want to do because I want to get these expensive Clockroaches out of my hand. They're not really doing anything, and we're currently winning on board, so I can afford not to spend... So I can afford not to play the cheaper Clockroaches. Now I am willing to trade this Overwhelm Clockroach for 2 Tyriax Hatchlings if my opponent is interested in doing that. So I'm going to attack with it because we can start getting aggressive now. Our left field isn't super in danger, and we have a blocker, so we can just get in there. Get a little aggressive. Our opponent's blocking. Our opponent's starting to tank with pretty much every play, which is usually a good sign for us. That probably means that they're not sure about the decisions they're making. Oh, they have a Champion of Wisdom. Okay, so this is one of the things that could conceivably claw them back into the game. But we now have 7/7 Flying Overwhelm Clockroaches. So this is just not gonna do what they want it to do. Oh, I should have blocked this Nesting Avisaur. That was a poor decision on my part. I apologize, guys. No excuse for playing loose. We found another Twinning Ritual. So this is kind of just getting absurd. Our Clockroaches are just becoming giant walls of text, as they are wont to do. We just found Killer on our Clockroaches, which is going to just remove this Champion of Wisdom as a problem. Okay, let's look at all the abilities that we've got here. Flying, Overwhelm, Endurance, Killer, Warcry, Ambush, Quick Draw, Echo, Unblockable, and Aegis. So our Clockroaches can just shoot things for free, basically, right now. We still haven't found Charge on any of our Clockroaches, but that's just not that much of a concern. I want to play the less impressive Clockroaches because I don't need to kill anything yet, and so I can just play the Clockroaches with less abilities and start threatening our opponent hugely. I'll attack with this 5/5. Again, I'm fine trading this for a couple dudes if my opponent wants to do that. We just have way more resources than our opponent, as the Clockroach deck will often do. Because drawing Echo cards 5 or 6 or 7 times in the same game will do that. It will generate lots and lots of resources. We'll pass the turn back to our opponent. They've got 2 cards. Apparently one of them is an Initiate of the Sands. Is the other one a power card? The other one could be a power card. It could be some kind of removal. Could be even like a Stormlinks or something. But it's probably just not super relevant, in all honesty. We're just going to attack with a lot of Clockroaches. See what happens. I'm fine with our opponent blocking this Temple Scribe, because it means they'll probably die. I think they're dead anyway, because we have 2 Overwhelm 8/8s and a 9/9 unblockable. But we'll see. We'll see if our opponent has something that I'm not expecting. They have a Lightning Strike, which is removal, but it's not going to save them. They're dead. Well played. Okay, guys, in this video, we discussed a little bit about other options for the Clockroach deck, and we saw kind of the weaknesses of the deck, and we saw another game with the deck as it usually wins. We'll go ahead and open this Omens of the Past pack here for you guys, just get a little fan service up in there. See what we can get out of here. Stalwart, Silverwing, Belching Behemoth, Argent Banner. Banners are nice. I like to develop my power bases. Dispo, Left Right Memory Keeper, Sparkbot, Trailblaze. Trailblaze is fast becoming a hallmark of Primal decks. You can, at fast speed, you can get some card selection. You can really look for the card that you want. Cult Aspirant. This is a cornerstone of the Xenan Life Force deck. Swift Strangers. Strangers have charge. I'm sure this was in our first opponent's deck. Just giving your Strangers charge, making them a lot faster. And Cod for the Devoted, which is a rare, which is extremely powerful in the Life Force deck. It's actually one of the ways that our Clockroaches deck loses to that Xenan Life Force deck, is that they just get to play a Katra and start gaining some life and outpacing our Clockroach beats. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you guys for watching. By all means, post any comments, post any suggestions or feedback in the comments below. I look forward to hearing from you guys in the future, and I'll be back with more Dark Clockroach Eternal gameplay soon. See you guys later.